Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're going to continuing series on the Steam Deck, more importantly how to get emulators set up, and when those emulators are set up, what games you should be playing on each individual console. And today we're going to be talking about GameCube. A lot of you guys have asked for a video, so we're doing it today. And I will say that while I do love the GameCube, the library isn't the deepest thing in the world. We're not going to be talking about Super Mario Sunshine or any Zelda games on this video. I want to talk a little bit more of the deeper cuts on the system, or things that I think people kind of ignore. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, one of my favorite GameCube games of all time that I never hear anybody talk about is Chibi Robo. This is Nintendo at its weirdest, and it has that same sort of Pikmin vibe going on, except there aren't a lot of creatures you need to control. You just get one Chibi Robo and you take him through the entire adventure. Well, why I love this game so much is the sense of humor and sense of charm and whimsy this game exhibits is second to none on the GameCube. And in my opinion, this game still looks absolutely spectacular visually on a stock GameCube, but when you get into Dolphin and you start upscaling that internal resolution, all of the graphics hold up and the charm just gets that much better. It is a very simple game on its premise. You are Chibi Robo, you need to win happy points to upgrade to Super Chibi Robo by doing things around the family's house for them. It's a very small environment. Of course, you are tiny and this is just a home, and it has some Katamari Damacy vibes going on as well. But it's one of those things, this just reminds me of the GameCube, because it was one of those eras of Nintendo where they were definitely experimenting and kind of playing around with different types of games. And the GameCube came in third place in a three-man race, and it basically feels like the precursor to the Wii U, another failed Nintendo console technically, that also has some really strange and odd games on it. But if you've never played Chibi Robo before, if you've never even heard of it before, leave me a comment down below and tell me if you have played it. I would be curious, but it is one of the first games I recommend you check out on the Dolphin emulator for your deck. Now moving on to my favorite game on GameCube, Killer 7. This is Goichi Suda of Grasshopper Manufacture fame, who would go on to do No More Heroes, and this is basically feeling like a little bit of a precursor to that game. But in my opinion, this is the best thing Suda51 ever did as far as games are concerned, before this or after it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking his games whatsoever, I've loved them all, but Killer 7 just has all of this unique, weird visual flair going on, with gameplay mechanics that kind of feel like an on-rails light gun shooter, except you do have control of your motion. But when I say this game oozes style, I 100% mean it. From the cel-shaded artwork, to all of the different characters, to every absurd thing going on, this wears its personality on its sleeve, and you will never forget playing this game. But it's one of those things, if you didn't play it on GameCube or PlayStation 2 back in the day, maybe it's something you did miss out on. But I think this is, in my opinion, the best game on the GameCube, at least for me. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite GameCube is. I do love Super Mario Sunshine, it's one of my favorite in the franchise, and I could almost call that my favorite, but Killer 7 just has the weird, absurd nature I love in a game. And if you're a fan of No More Heroes or any of the other Suda51 games and you've never played Killer 7 before, you owe it to yourself to check it out, because this game starts out strange, and it just gets stranger and stranger as the game goes on. But visually, I think this is a stunning game. The colorways and the art style 100% worked on GameCube, and it is another game that looks absolutely spectacular, upscaled, in your Steam Deck, whether you're docked or on handheld mode. This game just gets looking better the more resolution you throw at it, and that is what's great about something like Dolphin Emulation on the Steam Deck. It lets you relive games maybe you played and maybe you love in a completely different way. But trust me when I tell you, you'll never forget Killer 7 once you play it once. All of these characters, this bondage man hanging from the ceiling with his eyelids stitched shut, these are iconic characters, and so much of what would go into No More Heroes kind of starts here in Killer 7. A lot of the foundational themes and stylistic elements Suda51 would take into the future started right here. Now, keeping on the slightly strange theme but going into a much brighter game, it's Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. This is a 3D platformer made by Sonic Team and has nothing to do with Sonic whatsoever. I almost put Sonic Heroes on this playlist, but I decided to go Billy Hatcher because I feel like a lot more people have never played this game before, and leave me a comment down below and tell me if you had. But it is a game from Sega where you get a giant egg in a chicken suit and you roll an egg to attack enemies, and it's got a great soundtrack. Go ahead and listen for 35 seconds and I will be right back with more eggs.
Yeah!
It's got an awesome soundtrack, and boy is it a very strange game, because this is from Sonic Team, but it has nothing to do with Sonic whatsoever, and if you think of Sega games, this is probably not one that's going to come to mind. And it kind of feels like the bridge between a Sonic game and a traditional 3D platformer, because unlike Sonic, Billy Hatcher here does not need to go fast. He is actually quite a slow character. When you read the best GameCube games of all time list, Billy Hatcher is never going to show up on any of them. I would be surprised if anyone ever brings it up in that top 10, but I absolutely love this game. It is Sega being Sega, doing something experimental and weird, and it just 100% works. It is a super fun, super competent 3D platformer with a completely different hook, having an egg and dressing as a chicken. It's got an amazing soundtrack, and the graphics were spectacular on GameCube, and look even better upscaled to 1080p or even 4K if you want to try to push it with your Steam Deck. Your results may vary, but some games do seem to get that far. Now, moving on to a very obvious game, but probably not one that people play on GameCube anymore, is going to be the Resident Evil remake on GameCube. I absolutely love the entire Resident Evil franchise, and while the original RE on PlayStation 1 is still a blast from the past epic good time, for me, remake here is the preferred way to play the original Resident Evil. And I know this is on PlayStation 3, you can play it in HD, but I think on the deck screen, this just looks like the best version to me. This is how I remember playing it, and outside of having to remap your brain for tank controls, if you haven't played in a while, you're going to have to do that. This is just the best Resident Evil remake that Capcom's ever done. And I know they've done 2, I know they've done 3 and 4 at this point in time, but for my money, Capcom nailed it out of the gate with the best Resident Evil remake ever made on the GameCube. And maybe you haven't played the original remake in a long time, or maybe you actually haven't visited it at all. Definitely check this out. I think it works perfectly on the Steam Deck or any other way you want to play it, because this is the iconic original Resident Evil where the entire franchise got its start. It just looks so much better than the PlayStation 1 version. And when this game came out on GameCube back in the day, I bought it day one, and seeing this level of visuals on a system felt game changing. I understand that there's still pre-rendered, not everything in this game is made of polygons, but this game still 100% holds up, both from a visual standpoint, but also a gameplay mechanic as well. This is just an amazing game, and if Capcom released this tomorrow and the original GameCube remake never existed, this would be getting 9 out of 10s in my opinion. I think it's definitely better than the Resident Evil 3 remake. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite Resident Evil is and what your favorite remake is, because I would be curious. I'm about halfway through the Resident Evil 4 remake, and while I do enjoy that one, I feel like Resident Evil 4 is modern enough where I could just say play the GameCube version, don't worry about the remake, and I think most people would get like 95% of what Capcom's going for. But the mansion here on GameCube on Steam Deck just looks absolutely amazing. Now moving on to one of the most visually intriguing games on the GameCube, and one of the harder games to emulate, is Automodelista, and it does run great on my setup here. And this is the type of game that you're either going to 100% love or 100% hate, because this is not arcade driving physics. This is way more simmy feeling with a lot of drifting involved. Even though it looks 100% like an arcade racer visually, it is all cell shaded, and that was popular on the GameCube. This is the third game that I've talked about with cell shading on the video so far. But this is the type of game you're going to pick it up, you're going to start to play it, and it is going to fight you. You're going to go into the wall, you're going to spin your car out, you're going to think that you're making mistakes. It's not that you're making mistakes, that you're just not identifying what the game is asking of you. This is way more strategic of a racing game than it seems like, and there's not a ton of racing games on the GameCube. It wasn't the most popular genre then. Of course, stuff like Burnout exists, definitely check that out. But Automodelista is one of those games, if you play it and you get into it, you will be hooked. But you'll know within like the first 20 minutes, you'll either say this is the best thing I've ever tried, or I hate it. But it does have a really fun sort of techno soundtrack as well, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll be right back. Now moving on to a racing game, to a quote-unquote racing game, is Simpsons Hit and Run. Now I understand that this is a game that most people probably know about, but I don't know if every single one of you has actually played it. This is, in my opinion, the best Simpsons game ever made, and when this first came out and I bought it on GameCube, I played the ever-loving hell out of it. And I'm not even the biggest Simpsons fan. Sure, I watch the cartoon, sure I enjoy it, but it's not like I know everything about these series. But this game, back in the day, just proved that there could be a good Simpsons game. And if you're into Grand Theft Auto at all, back in the PlayStation 2 era, this is going to feel like the Simpsons version of that. And I understand that not everyone that watches this channel was buying games back in the GameCube era, so maybe you just haven't come around to something like Simpsons Hit and Run. It is the simplest game to pick up and play, but the sense of humor, exploring Springfield in a virtual environment, running around in full 3D and completing these missions, is just so much fun. I absolutely love it, and this game is a relatively long game as well for what it's on offer. You get so many different characters, so many different cars, so many different missions. There's always something fun to do, and you can actually run over pedestrians, which is fun for The Simpsons in and of itself. It has every single iconic Simpsons location in it, and while the handling of the vehicles can be a little bit floaty, the entire time you're playing this game, you just have a smile on your face. It makes you happy to check it out. I love that it's not just a driving game. You can get out of the car and run around the world in full 3D and see different environments from the show, and all of the different callbacks as well. Homer here can go and get himself different outfits, and they are just hilarious. Casual Homer just in his underwear, 10 out of 10. We move on to the Moo Moo. That's a 15 out of 10 episode right there. And of course, The Chosen One, another great episode and another great costume. This is just the type of game, if you've never played Hit and Run before and you even casually like The Simpsons, throw it on your Steam Deck, load it up, give it a shot. I would be very surprised if you didn't like it. I'll give you my money back guarantee that you will, but because you pay me nothing, that guarantee is basically worth $0, but I'm still willing to bet that 9 out of 10 of you will think this game is great if you've never played it before. Now, going from something with a car to something completely different and a hell of a lot harder is going to be Ikaruga. This is one of the best shmups of all time, but it is also one of the hardest, most brain-breaking shmups of all time. The mechanic is you can change the color of your ship from black to white or light or dark. If you shoot the opposing color ship with those projectiles, they will not shoot suicide bullets at you. If you shoot a light color ship with your ship, it is going to throw suicide projectiles your way, and that is going to make it incredibly difficult not to die in this game, because when I tell you this game is hard, it is hard as nails. I consider this to be a lot harder than most bullet hell shmups, but it's just because I have difficult times reading all of the colors and transitioning my ship in real time. It really does hurt my brain. It is the type of game that takes a lot of practice. But if you're a shmup fan and you have a Steam Deck and you want to play some good shmups on the go, Ikaruga is a decent time. Now in handheld mode it's going to be a little bit small, but if you have your Steam Deck docked, you're going to be 100% perfectly good to go. And I will say I absolutely love the soundtrack of Ikaruga as well. Listen for 30 seconds and I'll be back with some more games. The soundtrack for Ikaruga just 100% works with the theming of the game, and I will tell you right now that you're either going to love this game or it's going to break your brain like it breaks my brain, because even though I can navigate around some of the bullet patterns, this game just still gives me all sorts of trouble, and it is down to that color changing mechanic. But just because I am not good at the game does not mean I don't have fun. I absolutely continue to try to get better at Ikaruga and see what I can do, because you will see depending on your color you can absorb the bullets, and that's going to be a big mechanic. But this is just stage 2 and I've already used 2 of my 3 initial continues. It's going to take you a very long time to see the end of Ikaruga, but that's the fun in this, and it's such a quick pick up and play game that you're walking around with your Steam Deck, just play for 10-15 minutes on your commute to work and then just put it away. It's going to probably kill you well before those 10 to 15 minutes are over, so you don't need to really worry about too much of your timing. Now, one game that is always talked about for the GameCube, and I'm surprised has not been remade at this point in time, is Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem. This is basically more of like an action Resident Evil, like Resident Evil and Tomb Raider met and had a baby and spit out Eternal Darkness. This game is every bit as good as you have probably read about, and it's one game that I don't feel like gets mentioned as much now as it used to 10 to 15 years ago, because when this game came out on the GameCube, it was getting amazing review scores, and for some time it seemed to get mentioned by a lot of people as one of the GameCube's best games, but I did look up a couple top 10 lists of all-time GameCube today, and I did not see Eternal's Darkness mentioned on any of those lists, which actually kind of surprised me. It's an atmospheric horror game that basically pivots between different characters and different timelines, trying to solve out how this girl's grandfather was murdered. I'm only showing you the beginning of the game because I don't want to do any spoiler stories, because this is a very good story-based game as well. It's not just an action horror game. It does have a good storyline underneath it that does work, and all of the voice acting is as good as it gets for that era. But this is just one of those games. I remember playing it back in the day. I've owned my copy since then, and I probably played it like 10 years ago on a GameCube in my office. But now that I have a Steam Deck in my hand, I popped it on because I knew I remembered I loved it, and I'm probably going to end up playing this game from start to finish in the next week. It's just one of those games that it is good as you have heard, and probably even better upscale. I think this game really does look good with that internal resolution bump that Dolphin gives it, and this game does have some genuinely scary moments for its era. It's definitely not going to rival modern horror games whatsoever, but it does have a lot of that horror, and trust me, if you like Resident Evil style puzzles, Eternal Darkness is going to give them to you in spades. Because you'll see in this observatory there's 3 different boxes on the wall where you need to spin a bar around to line something up, and if you like spinning bars, you're definitely going to love our next game. I'm very proud of this transition. It is Carurin Squash. Now, you've either heard about this franchise or you have absolutely no idea what the hell it is, and leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've heard about it, because I'm expecting most people probably haven't, but the intro is absolutely spectacular with big Paper Mario vibes. And when you get into the later levels of this game, it is one hell of a challenge. I almost did Super Monkey Ball 2 in this spot, but I decided to go to Carurin Squash because I feel like so less people have actually heard of it. It is a very simple game though. You are this line in the screen, you move around with the analog stick. If you hit the wall, you take damage 3 times, and you die. If you've ever played the game Operation, you'll understand this game instantaneously, but it does take a deft hand to get through some of the later levels, and you are also on a timer, and this is a score-based game. You can't run out of time, but if you take too long, your score is going to suffer. But it's one of those things, incredibly simple, incredibly hard to master, and perfect on-the-go gameplay on a Steam Deck, because you can play 3 rounds in like 3 minutes. But it also has an absolutely catchy soundtrack. Go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, and again, I will be right back, but it is good. And those are the games I recommend you play on your Steam Deck on the Dolphin emulator for GameCube. Of course, there's so many obvious games I could recommend, but that's not what this series is about. It's kind of giving you guys some deep cuts or other esoteric hits that you may not know about. Sure that I'll be back next week with more Steam Deck content. I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but we are done, and I hope you're enjoying your weekend. Bye-bye.